So with potential changes to how we deliver our teaching next September on the cards, what we really want to be able to do is track the impact of those changes and understand how they influence our programs. And ultimately what we want to do is make sure that the learning outcomes for a program aren't compromised in any way as a result of any changes that we might have to make to our delivery. Curricular makes that relatively easy to do. So if we take, for example, here one of our programs, let's just consider our BEng in Civil Engineering. Now, this is the program that we have intended to deliver in September, but with the changes potentially that we might have to cope with, what I really need to do now is review this program and see how do any potential changes affect it. Now, I don't want to lose this record. I want to keep this record of the program because any changes that we might have to make next year will only be temporary. Let's hope. And so I want to keep this record intact, but I also want to have a different version, let's call it the coronavirus version of this program record, and use that as my tool for investigating the changes. What that will mean is going to my program, looking at its structure and looking at certainly the modules that are in term one at least in each of my years, and asking the module leader for each of those modules to go back into their module and look and see how they would deliver that module, or how would they change that module for, let's say, for example, remote delivery. Now, we may or may not have to do remote delivery, but let's imagine we want to plan for that now. And so we would go into each module and we would evaluate it to see what are the changes that need to be made in that module. So what we're going to do then is we're going to go back and look at each one of those modules that are in term one, and I'll do one now. I'll take a quick look at fundamentals of mechanics, materials and electronics, first year module next year. So I'm the module leader for this, so I would go in here and let's imagine I need to make some changes. Again, this is the module record. I don't want to lose this record, I just want to make some changes. So what I'll do is duplicate it, give it an appropriate title and code. So the things that we need to make sure we change with the duplicate record are the name and the code. It won't let us submit the module record with the same name and code if we've tried to duplicate. So at this point, I would go in and basically review everything in this module record to see, if I had to deliver this remotely, what would I change? Would I need to change any of my syllabus items? And if so, I would alter my syllabus here. I would look at, my resources there's no resources yet listed, but my resource section, if I'm going to deliver this module remotely, may have to be significantly extended. We need to consider how feasible are the various different methods of assessment and amend those accordingly. We would look at our learning activities and we would see, obviously that would, if we're going to have to deliver this remotely, and again, I'm not saying we would deliver this remotely, that's not the plan, but if one had to deliver this remotely, you would review these and you would basically essentially start from scratch and look at how you were going to deliver this module, and you would record those changes here under your learning activities. And then intended learning outcomes, again, you would want to assess and make sure that your remote delivery mode would allow you to develop these learning outcomes, or allow a student to develop these learning outcomes. And obviously, if your assessments changed, your assessments against each learning outcome would also change. So really what we're doing here is we're allowing a module leader to make wholesale changes without impacting their original record. Again, prerequisites might need to change. From an accreditation point of view, it's going to be critical that we review each of our attribute mappings. And so this is for anyone not familiar, this is where we relate our module learning outcomes to the, in the case of an engineering program in the UK, AHEP learning outcomes. And so we would review our mappings here to make sure that they are all still valid. So that allows us to demonstrate back to an accrediting body that we have been able to develop the AHEP learning outcomes with our program. So essentially, you're just reviewing the module record in light of a different delivery mechanism. Now, when you've got that done, when the module leader has reviewed the complete record and they're happy with it, they'll simply save the record. And that is now a separate record that lives in the database. So I can pull up my module code again, and I can now see two records. So now this one we see is pending review. So I leave my original record untouched. So I can come back in. It's not being reviewed yet, so I have to basically submit this for review. In order for me to submit it for review, I just go into the edit workflow, scroll to the bottom, and submit for review. Now that's gone to the program lead for that module to review. I happen to also be the program lead, so I can play the role of the program lead now and review that module. So I'd go back into the change control section and I can see I have one pending review. I would go in, I would review, as now the program lead, I would first of all review the message that was provided to me by the editor. I'd make sure I was satisfied with what's being proposed for the program. And then I would either reject it or approve it. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve it. So now we have a new module record reviewed specifically for the purposes of remote delivery. So what you would then probably want to do is understand how do all those changes made individually at a module level come together and affect the program. So for this, we'd go ahead and duplicate the program in much the same way as we duplicated the module. So I go into programs, go to the relevant program, and again, follow the very same workflow. Now I want to duplicate this program, again, giving it an appropriate title, and then submitting this, well, first of all, duplicating it to save it. So we can see here it is here, and now we want to submit that for review. So again, it's pending review. If I want to submit that to the person listed as the reviewer for this program, enter the edit workflow, and then go down and submit for review. Now it so happens that I'm also the reviewer for that program, so I would then go to my change control section once again and just approve that record. So now we have a new version of the program record that lives in the database, which is this guy here, leaving the original record untouched, because remember, we probably only want to use this record for 1 year, and then we want to revert back to our standard, our normal civil engineering record. So note that I just duplicated that record, but I didn't make any changes to it yet. So what we now need to do is make the changes for the delivery next year. And what that really means, what that really means is I need to go in and swap out the modules that are currently listed in this program and replace them with the CV-19 version of the modules. It's important to remember that when you duplicate a program in Curricular, you're duplicating the program, but that program is still pointing towards the same or the original modules. And so if I change the modules in this program, I'm also changing them in the original version of the program. And it's done that way, it's set up that way to allow you to generate duplicate versions of programs for different variants. So variants of programs with international study or with industrial experience where you want the duplicate program to point towards the same modules. This is a peculiar case in that we want the duplicate program to point to different versions of the modules. And so we need to swap those modules out, and we can do that now fairly easily. So again, editing this program, we would come down and as a program lead, you would review the contents of this record and change anything that needed to be changed in light of the different delivery mechanism. But the main thing that you're going to want to do is change your program content. So you're going to want to swap out these versions of the modules for the COVID-19 or CV-19 versions of the modules. Now, we've only generated one. We generated a duplicate for fundamentals of mechanics, materials, and electronics. So I want to swap out that. That's pretty straightforward. I just select it in the program content section. It disappears from down here, and now it's back up here for me to edit. Now I'm going to replace it with this version of the module, with this CV-19 version. We can see it here, and I can add that back into the program without changing anything else. So now I've swapped out the module. Now the good thing about this is, as I go ahead and swap out all of the modules that I need to swap out, and we're probably only going to be dealing with term 1 modules, or at least let's hope, that's going to then put all of that different data, it's going to build our program with different module data, and it's going to give us that overall picture of a COVID-19 version of a program. So I'm just going to go ahead and submit that for review. And then the person responsible for reviewing that program would again review and approve the program. So just to recap then, we can go back in and we can look at the CV-19 version of the program, which now pulls in all of its data from the updated modules, the CV-19 version of the modules. And then we can go in and do all of the usual things that we would do with a program. Note here that we have the CV-19 version of the module. We can look at the learning activities in some detail. We would likely see quite a big change in your learning activities because obviously things would be remote, or for at least term 1. You would look at your assessments, you could look at your program syllabus, but most importantly, you would be able to come in and review your ILO attribution to understand exactly how you are meeting your in this case, BEng, AHEP, ILOs, how you're meeting those across your program with your edited modules. And that'll allow you then to demonstrate to your accrediting body that although you've had to make changes to your mode of delivery for 2021, you can still demonstrate that your students have been able to develop, or they haven't been negatively impacted and have been able to develop the relevant AHEP ILOs. Hopefully that's just a quick demonstration of how you can use Curricular to help you keep track of any changes that you might have to make next year if things don't return to normal and we do end up having to make changes to how we deliver our programs.